In today's episode, you'll learn how to lead employee resource group programs and how to structure them for success. Let's make a social impact. Hi everyone, I'm Carl. Welcome to the Social Impact Show, a channel where you get the latest strategies and tips to help you scale and grow your CSR and goodness programs. So today I've got two guests. My first guest, she's also my co-host. Her name is Tiffany Heward. She is a community builder in the ERG space. And our special guest today is Maceo Owens, who is a ERG Homegirl and CEO and founder of the ERG Movement. Thank you again for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
So today we're talking part two of our discussion, and we're going to be talking about ERG, building a successful ERG program. So Tiffany, take it away.
Yeah. So Maceo, I know that you've worked with a lot of ERG program leaders, and I'd love to just know, what are some of the most common challenges that you see across programs?
Yeah. So the best way that I like to describe it recently, and it's kind of a newer train of thought, but in the entrepreneur space, which is really where my background is, they like to describe a lot of the problems that exist within small businesses down to three categories. So people, process, and product is typically three categories. So if there's something wrong with the small business and if it's not growing like the owner wants it to, they typically narrow it down to one of those three categories. And I realize there's a direct parallel, just like with everything in entrepreneurship. And that's why I love just the combination of the two spaces, where really typically it's the people, and it goes in that exact order as well. So first of all, getting alignment across all of the stakeholders of the program, all the ERG leaders on what the program's about, so that program vision, and even the strategy on how you're going to reach that vision. Then the process, so having governance for those various ERG leaders, what ERGs are going to exist, what roles exist, what data and metrics are you going to use to measure the ERG success. And then instead of products, similar thing, but essentially the product of ERGs will be their programming and initiatives themselves. So that's where you get into the specifics of what events are we going to do and what do we want this ERG to accomplish when it comes to like tangible outcomes and things like that. 9 times out of 10, what I've seen in the ERG space is that most of the time, just like with small business owners, they skip right to the product. So with ERG leaders, they skip right to the programming, and even program managers too, where they're like, okay, we have an ERG program. Let's start just pumping out events and doing stuff. And oftentimes there's no alignment when it comes to, well, what is this ERG program about? Is this mainly to impact the business? And do we want to work with all the different teams in the business? Or do we want this to be an employee-focused program where we really want to build belonging amongst employees, or do we want it to be both? So everyone has a different idea of what the ERG program is. Not to mention there's no strategy then, because you don't have that end destination. So then you can't paint a picture of how you're going to get there. And then even when it comes to the governance, it sounds so obvious, but a lot of times there's no structure on what are the different roles that should exist within an ERG? How are we measuring success? Those things just don't exist in many ERG programs, because most of the time, like I said, people, they just want to start going and doing. So typically when I talk to ERG leaders and program managers, I say, just take a step back, even if it's just like a 90-day pause, just to get things in order to make the ERG program more sustainable long-term and to get alignment from everyone on what we hope to accomplish with the ERG program.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think my next question, I think you started touching on it, but kind of what are the pitfalls that they fall into that lead to those challenges? But it sounds like it's maybe kind of trying to run before you've started walking a little bit. So I guess if you could get them set up in a place where they could avoid those challenges, what are the things that they should really look at the outset to kind of make sure that things are set up in a sustainable way? Because that's kind of a common thread that has been coming up with other DEI professionals, I feel like, who featured on the Social Impact Show as well.
Yep. When it comes to ERG leader sustainability, it's really building that system. So just making it really easy for the ERG, honestly, to be autonomous. So don't look at ERG program management as a long-term thing, because ideally, if your ERG program's in a good place, it's able to run on its own. But that'll never happen if you don't take the time to create the structure, what ERG roles should exist within each of the ERGs. If they do want to scale, what does that mean and how does that look like? Who do they reach out to when X, Y, and Z things happen? So really creating a strong process doc for each of the various roles, having a data dashboard that explains at any given moment where the ERG is and how close it is to getting to its goals, having a strategy that, again, maps out how the ERG program is going to get to where it wants to get to. So those are three things that I would say that are a must in an ERG program.
So Maceo, what would your advice be to program leaders on how to structure their programs to set them up for success? So, I thought you could maybe dive into the analogy of running an ERG like a small business to include the 3 Ps of like people, process, and product.
Yep. So with this, the analogy that I give a lot, and I will say I didn't come up with this. I read it in a book, but it just made so much sense when I heard it. ERG leadership, or being an ERG leader, is like being a really good cake baker. Like if I'm really into baking cakes, similar to where a lot of ERG leaders are, where they're experts in the thing that they love or their culture in particular, or whatever community they belong to. Just like an expert cake baker, which like my mom could really be just interested in cake baking. Now, that being said, would I recommend that my mom start and open her own cake baking small business to say like, just because you're good at it or because you like it, that equals business mode? Because when you turn it into a business, I mean, there's so many things that go into a thriving business, and that's why a lot of small businesses stay small. That's why a lot of mom and pop shops stay small, because they don't understand how to set up their business for long-term success or to scale. So similar concept. When it comes to ERG leaders, they love their community, they love their culture. But then when it comes to bringing that into an ERG space and being an ERG leader, it looks so much different than just baking cakes or than just talking about the thing that you love. Building a community, there's so much more to it. And that's why I say with this people, process, product, similar concept when it comes to ERGs, people, process, and programming, making sure that you have those 3 things down, that you have your vision, you have your strategy and how you're going to reach that vision, you have your governance, you have your data, get the people in place, and then you launch. Or if you've already launched, just go back and do those things and you'll be in a place for long-term success. But I'll also add to, if there's ever any questions when it comes to like, well, we just don't know where we're going. That's clearly what the problem is. That's why I made the ERG movement model, because that literally maps out the journey of any ERG. Like really and truly, it's a little bit shocking to me that never existed in the ERG space, like just clarity on what an ERG is and where it's going. Historically, it's been the affinity group, ERG, BRG, and that was like the development model that existed. But really, just to have more clarity on what it means, just like a small business going from an infancy stage where it feels like everyone's doing a little bit of everything, we're a little bit disorganized. Same exact concept with ERG leaders. It feels like everyone's doing a little bit of everything, it's disorganized, to actually going to a maturity phase where other business units are able to take your ERG seriously and your program seriously, because you clearly take it seriously by analyzing data, by having a clear strategy, and all of those things. That was a long answer to say all of those things. People, process, and product was essentially the answer to so much.
So I really like that analogy of, running a business with growing an ERG, especially the scaling part, because I think you're right. There's a lot of small businesses that really have a tough time to scale. And having more employees and having more employee engagement and, really understanding those aspects of the business. And you can definitely see the relationship with that, with an ERG where, how do you get more increased participation? How do you get more people to engage? And how do you keep that momentum going? So that's an awesome analogy. And maybe you can shift to, can you tell us more about how you did that or how you're doing that with the ERG movement?
Yep. So with the ERG movement, my goal is to put out as many resources really around those 3 pillars: people, process, and product. But even within that, there's so many other like micro struggles, I guess, that really fall under those buckets that we see. So ERG leaders burning out, or like you just mentioned, low engagement. So I really just want to put out resources that I have personally used to combat these major issues. So for instance, ERG leaders feeling burnt out when it comes to like, we don't even know what event to do for our members. So with the ERG movement, we have the ERG Idea Hub. that has over 7,000 at this exact moment, over 7,000 examples of ERG programming, real life things that companies are doing with pictures and everything. This way, ERG leaders don't have to come up with something from scratch. They're now just taking potentially an idea from another ERG or from another company. So really just being someone who's been an ERG leader, I've been an ERG member, I've been an ERG program manager. So I know the struggles. I'm trying to put out as many resources as possible for the ERG community to make it simpler for people to help people.
I love that. And then I think we can jump into kind of like a quick question. So I think if you want to be able to answer this in like kind of around a minute, I think you've already touched on it a lot, but if you could offer maybe just one piece of advice for ERG program leaders to consider when they set up their programs, what would it be?
One piece of advice, I will say you have to have confidence in what you're doing. And that is a big, like, I think that that's super underrated because a lot of the time, ERG program managers, one, they come from the D&I space. They don't come from like entrepreneurship space like I do. So oftentimes they aren't really set up for success with this role because a lot of times business leaders feel like, oh, you're in D&I, you're automatically qualified to run an ERG program, which again, that's like saying you're really good at baking cakes. That means that you should automatically like start a business where again, it does not equal that. However, if you look at the resources and you really feel confident in what the ERG program is and what it's going to become, and maybe you do that by speaking to other, like to business leaders, that is what you have to do. This way, when anyone tries to come with their random ideas, which they always do, you will feel that resolve to stay the course. And that's what's going to get you the results you want. Hopefully that was under a minute.
I'm sure it's perfect. So I think, I mean, we could chat about this all day, but I think, do you have anything kind of before we close that you want to add to this segment and kind of let the folks out there know about?
Do I have anything? Honestly, I will just keep plugging the ERG Movement. I'll plug the community in this case because every single month we have a different topic that we focus on when it comes to the ERG space and a different pain point that we focus on. There's always going to be a masterclass included in that and a ton of free resources, not to mention hundreds of ERG leaders in that. And it's free, at least at the time of me saying this. So probably means you should join.
So Maceo, how would people be able to join? Like, what's the best place to reach you and what's the best place to get more information about the ERG movement?
Yes. So about the ERG movement, you can go to the ergmovement.com and has a link to all of our socials. So to our podcast, to our blog posts, to our YouTube, all the things. There's so many things there, and even the link to the community and the idea hub that I mentioned. And you can reach me on LinkedIn. Just make sure to connect with me, send me a message, and it might not be immediate, but I will get back to you.
Learn more about employee resource groups by checking out this playlist here. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in our next episode.